Hello, this is Natalie from GGGI headquarters in Seoul. Bonjour à tous. So firstly, I'd like to thank the Paris Peace Forum organizers for selecting GGGI's project. Very happy to be here on this platform with other innovators in the global governance space. So I'm leading the work in sanitation from Seoul's headquarters and focusing most of my work on the Green Siwis project, which covers both Nepal and Senegal. So we have a core team in Nepal with Rowan Fraser and Luna Keshari, and in Senegal with Romain and Abdoulaye Faye, but we also have lots of experts here in headquarters that help with the investment, with the climate angle, and with the planning. Without further ado, let me start. So this project is called the City-Wide Inclusive Sanitation Service, and it focuses on the links between sanitation and climate change, helping vulnerable communities to enhance the resilience of their sanitation infrastructure. So by building on the links to climate change, we not only want to protect the environment, also protecting vulnerable communities' health, and also trying to help countries unlock climate finance for these key services. So GGGI, we're a relatively new organization. We celebrated our 10 years this year, where the headquarters are in Seoul, as I mentioned, and we now have 38 members, 26 country operations. So the difference maybe between us and other international organizations is that we are based within ministries in our country operations. Often it's the Ministry of Environment, and that also eases access to key players in the climate fields, such as the NDA. I think one of our most famous heads is Ban Ki-moon. He's the president of the Assembly and chair of the council. We also have our DG, Dr. Frank Risberman, and we're dedicated to green growth. So to summarize the project, it's a project that will be ongoing for over 2 years. We started in 2019, and there are 4 main areas of work. One is to include sanitation in the climate change agenda, both at national and local level. Another area is to mobilize green investments. So we've set different targets in the different countries depending on the circumstances. So in Nepal, we're setting ourselves 50 million target investment, and in Senegal, 7 million. Both of them using very innovative models that can easily be replicated and scaled up. Another important element of our work is to generate evidence for the link between climate change and sanitation. And I'll talk more about that later. So sanitation is a challenge in many countries, not just Nepal and Senegal. So this is an analysis that we did for Nepal and Senegal, but it is applicable to many countries. There are currently 4.5 billion of people with no access to safely managed sanitation services. So why is there such low investments? One of the reasons is the limited bankability of sustainable sanitation services. And the other is the inadequate policy environment for this. So this project, what it did is still trying to do is looking at both aspects, both the financial and the policy elements. And our target outputs in Nepal, we've targeted doing 3 policy interventions to improve the ease of doing business in the sanitation sector. We've also managed to set both adaptation and mitigation targets into the NDC this year as we speak. It's just being signed off. And we're also in partnership with some leading universities in the climate change space, the climate and wash space. So Bristol University, Leeds University, and UTS in Sydney. We're looking at rolling out a methodology for both mitigation and adaptation. I'll speak a little bit more about that later. Then there's another element, which is the planning, where we have integrated green elements to the City-Wide Inclusive Sanitation strategy. And finally, but not least, the mobilization of green investments. So here we are targeting up to $50 million for investment in a pipeline of biogas plants, commercial biogas plants that will produce compressed CNG, so replacing LPG and using fecal sludge as one of the feeds and municipal solid waste as another feed. In addition, we're also going to start building finance facility for the sanitation services. So in Senegal, we have similar targets. Each time we've tried to adapt to where the gaps are. So in Senegal, there was a real gap in containment. So across the fecal sludge management chain, we have containment, transport, treatment, and reuse. And containment is the very first, but it's the basis a little bit of the whole chain. And a lot of the containment is currently not, how can I say, it's leaking, it's done in a way that it drains, and this contaminates both the water sources, but it's also a health risk. So we've developed with the national institutions a norm for this containment. We're also looking at fiscal measures to help attract investment for climate financing for sanitation. And then similarly to Nepal, we're looking at integrating sanitation into the next NDC. So because Senegal had already developed their NDC, we have to look at the next one. And we're also working with the consortium that I mentioned earlier and the research project for adaptation and mitigation. And then for the planning elements, we are looking, we have developed using a methodology which DGI developed for Senegal, which I will describe a bit more, which is really for municipal level. And as I mentioned, the mobilization of green investment. So we're looking to support ONAS in the development of PPPs for 2 municipalities. And finally, for both Nepal and Senegal, as I mentioned, we're really trying to document elements that can be useful for scaling up and for other countries to be able to use. So we're in the first phase right now, and the first phase is basically developing these policy and business models, and we will be looking at a second phase, which is implementation. So the first phase should end by the end of next year, 2021, and we would be starting to implement in 2022. So a key achievement for us so far is the incorporation of sanitation into the NDC. So we've managed to get some policy targets in there, notably stating that we will be identifying indicators during the planning phase that need to be monitored, that make the link between sanitation and water and climate change. And then listing in the NDC investment targets that will either be conditional or unconditional. So we've named this as unconditional, so the state will do this, commit to do this as part under their budget. and we call this the NDC. And then we've listed all the investment that are linked to water and sanitation that really require additional climate financing, and we've called this NDC plus. And we've looked at what the impacts these different investment targets will have in terms of GHG emission reductions. So this graph is one of the previous drafts that we had, and we've since been able to get the government to commit to some additional investments. And so we're looking at a difference of GHG emission reductions that's far greater than this. And once it's officially approved, we'll be happy to share that on our webpage. So some of the main lessons learned to date, I think, that I would like to share here, the incorporation of sanitation and green planning processes. So we realized that municipalities have many ongoing issues to deal with, and solid waste was one of them. And so our solution actually brought these two challenges together and came up with one solution. So taking municipal solid waste as part of the feeds and adding it to the fecal sludge feeds to produce the CNG. We've also realized that it's been beneficial to municipalities to enable them to see what the climate risks are for their municipality. So you can see in the diagram here, Mahalashmi, one of the municipalities that we're working with, identifying what the climate risks are and looking at the solutions in terms of sanitation, and looking at the different pathways and what are the impacts for climate change, and for both adaptation and mitigation. And then as GGI, we really try and get the reuse across, because it's essential for green growth. And we've realized that there's a huge market for reuse for sanitation of products. Maybe to wrap up for Nepal, the assessment of linkages between climate change and sanitation have been useful, also to help go for that climate financing, but they are not easy. We need historical data at local level. And so this is something that we're working on, but it's an ongoing issue in many countries. So to Senegal, we've also learned many things from the year that we've been working, so since 2019. I think one of the key lessons learned was through the green planning process that we already had developed in Senegal, but that we applied to Kaolack. That's one of our target municipalities. So Kaolack is quite typical, let's say, for a large secondary town, in that it has a considerable amount of inhabitants, but there are still 33% without adequate sanitation services. So this is huge, and there's absolutely no fecal sludge treatment plant. So these are challenges that we have been addressing through this project. And to date, so we are developing this pipeline of biogas commercial plants for Nepal, and it's a little small, but there you can see one of the biogas plants that's already in operation without fecal sludge. And we have been looking at technical solutions to incorporate fecal sludge and municipal solid waste. So to date, they've been using more agricultural waste streams that have been easier to find, but we're looking at building capacity in municipal solid waste streams and fecal sludge waste streams to produce the CNG, and it is viable. There's a proportion that we need to respect. The organic waste needs to be of a certain standard and so on, but it's totally possible and would definitely provide a great breaking solution, I think, for sanitation and municipal solid waste. And so maybe to wrap up, before we get to questions, I just want to go back to the research project that we're also supporting through this program. So it's called the SCARE project, and we're looking at rolling out a methodology to estimate greenhouse gas emissions for fecal sludge management. So fecal sludge management is what's happening in most of the countries for the majority of the population. But in the NDCs and in the third communications and in all the national communications, this part of the emission calculations has not been done, and yet it accounts for most of the emissions from the sanitation side. So the UNFCCC does have a methodology, but we're looking for a more precise methodology, which will be testing in 5 countries, and where GGGI will be supporting in 2 in particular through this GATES project, so in Senegal and Nepal. We will also be looking at technology choices that would be beneficial both in terms of mitigation and adaptation. And then finally, having a methodology for both mitigation and adaptation that all countries could use, and having that approved by the UNFCCC as an improved methodology, and putting sanitation where it should be, as key for adaptation and mitigation. So that's for me, and I don't know if there are any questions. I do want to thank actually so the partners at national level. So UNAS, the national entity for sanitation, has been of great support. The Ministry of Water Supply and Sanitation in Nepal has also been a great support, as well as APC, which is the accredited entity for GCF in Nepal, looking at alternative energy. And of course, our donors, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, that have been supporting us throughout, not only financially, but also just guiding us through this process. So I see there's a question. Do you face, and I'm unfortunately a comment right in front of this, do I face cultural resistance? I'm not seeing it because there's a comment just in front of this. I don't want to add anything. Do I face cultural... Okay, do you face cultural resistance to change around waste management practices that are often deeply entrenched, and how do you tackle this? Yes, I think Nepal has been a great pilot country. So Nepal and Senegal have been 2 great pilot countries, because I think we're a little beyond that cultural resistance for fecal sludge, for sanitation anyway. So Nepal just last year was declared open defecation free, and so we've kind of overcome that understanding of how important sanitation is. Senegal, though it isn't ODF yet, it has made great strides, greatly thanks to UNAS as well. And so I feel that cultural issue in both Nepal and Senegal, we haven't had to deal with so much. What we are dealing with though is there will be need for enforcement of treatments. So in Senegal, this is now being enforced. There are strict laws so that fecal sludge is not taken to the rivers or dumped anywhere when there are treatment sites. However, this isn't often the case. In Nepal, I think we may face challenges around the enforcement, but ultimately, if we have a business model that works, so that the emptiers, it makes sense for them to go to this place instead of having to try and find a place each time and not get caught. I think we won't face too much resistance, and I do feel that in general, populations have become more aware of the importance of sanitation and the importance of treatment of fecal sludge waste. So there's another question. I don't know if you could move the question up a little bit, because I have a permanent comment. Okay, thank you. Comparing your, sorry, could you move it up a second? Comparing comparing experiences in two very different countries, what lessons do you take away for the broader replication of this model? So I think it's been very useful to see how countries can be different. Some of the analytical work has been useful to kind of repeat in both countries because it's similar. But in terms of solutions, I think we really had to take the technical solutions. We really had to take the local solution, the local context into consideration. And I think there's a plethora of solutions that are available, but I think it's being a little bit pragmatic in seeing what will work. I think there are ideal solutions, but we need to make them viable as well. And so I think being pragmatic in seeing what can work is maybe something that we've come away with, and to think big as well. I think initially in Nepal we were not thinking of investment targets so high, but we quickly saw the potential through a biogas pipeline to kind of go to national scale quite quickly. And we were lucky to have partners that are accompanying us on there. So yeah, I think it's been very useful to see very different contexts, but I think some of the issues have been similar, and we've been able to pass that learning across both countries. Again, I'm sorry, if you could move the question up, because I have a permanent add document, add poll behind this question. Do you hope the addition of, sorry, could you move the question up? I can see the question. Do you hope the addition of this will support your? I'm guessing it's through the Paris Peace Forum. But I'm really guessing. I don't know if there's any way of moving that comment up. Okay, I will assume it's that, hoping that the addition through the Paris Peace Forum will support the work. I think so. I think it's important to get the message across to many people that there are many innovative ways to address sanitation and to keep sanitation on the agenda. It's not one of the low-hanging fruits, but in terms of adaptation and impact on health for vulnerable communities and populations, it's one of the most effective. I saw in the IPCC's fifth assessment, it states that with very high confidence that one of the most effective measures for reducing vulnerability and health impact and climate change in the short term is to include programs and basic services like water and sanitation. And I'm kind of hoping to get that message out across through this platform as well. Please keep sanitation on the agenda for climate change as well. It's an important part of adaptation. Yeah, I don't know if there's any last questions before this shuts off. I'm not seeing any. So I think I can wrap up, and thank you very much again for the Paris Peace Forum for giving us the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to seeing the other pictures as well. I had a chance to see yesterday's pictures, some great pictures, and a very interesting and innovative platform as well, enabling us to be in contact with other projects, programs, and people. It's a really great initiative, and looking forward to connect with others across this platform. So I'll maybe just exit before it shuts me off. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you. Bye.